proposed budget amendments. And I'd like to start with introductions, and we'll start with you, Mr. Flynn.
Thank you, Ms. Ray Jackson. My name is Patrick.
Renee Hall.
Jennifer Johnston.
Dick Trainee.
I'll be Ray Jackson.
Pete Peterson. Tip Steele. Phil Starr.
Amy Domboski representing the beautiful area of Key River.
Oh, is it sunnier there than it is here?
And to the folks in the audience, please.
Nicole Myers,
Courtney Peterson, Albee. Barbara Jones.
David Dunsmore, staff, so Mr. Peterson.
Okay, and Rose.
Rose Foley, Assembly Budget Analyst.
Lance Wilbur. Wendy.
Thank you. So the process that we're gonna have this afternoon is we're gonna start with the general government operating budget, and we're gonna go amendment by amendment and allow each assembly member who has authored the amendment to talk about that amendment. So the first amendment is Assembly Members Hall, Flynn, and Steele. It's amendment number 1, and whoever'd like to begin the discussion, please feel free to do so.
Thank you. We submitted this amendment. We watched the senior center out there, and they struggled to stay current, keep their maintenance up, and I just felt that it was needed to at least maintain the CPI in their budget in order to be able to just stay current with expenses, which amounts to $5,700 for this next year, representing a 1.1% increment increase to it. So it's merely a process to try to keep up with inflation.
As presented, Ernie, their budget's flat. Is that?
Yes.
Yeah. Mr. Starr, you might recall, we did do an increment for both senior centers actually a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
So if you guys want to tag on.
So we get a lot of grant money. I think they're doing okay. I'll ask, but right now I think the operating cash is not as important as the grant cash for some of their facility improvements.
Good. Well, however you want to handle it.
Perfect.
Thank you, gentlemen, but we're gonna run this work session as we normally do.
Oh, sorry.
Recognizing the chair before you make any comments, I would appreciate that. Thank you. Mr. Hall, do you have anything else you'd like
No,
to
ma'am.
say? Thank you, Mr. Hall. The next amendment is amendment number 2, and that is offered by Assembly Member Starr. Mr. Starr?
You'll see a series of these. I'll speak as best I can to some of them, but sometime back we faced budgets that had embedded in every department communications managers and folks that dealt with communications. That was 5 or 6 years ago. We were successful to centralize sort of the database of how we outreach to communications. There used to be embedded in almost every department a separate IT guy. And we were able to sort of sanitize and centralize the IT functions into that. And so now my quest is to sort of look at where the accounting functions are diversified across the board and justify each one. This particular one I put first because it's a new growth position, not existing. ER wants to centralize some senior accountants for $121,000 into medical and dental self-insurance. Talking with the OMB folks, direct property tax contributions $36,300, and then various intergovernmental charges $84,700 pick up the tab. But again, I believe that with the staff of almost 60 in finance, let's put it there.
Thank you, Mr. Starr. Mr. Flynn?
Yeah, and I actually looked for these ahead of time, believe it or not. Mr. Starr, I'm curious, and this is sort of a blanket question for amendments 2 through 6.
Absolutely.
Is your, and I didn't see it, so I presume the answer is no. Is your intent to add staff to finance to support the departments and with some of these savings?
Well, without judging the executive branch decisions outright, I would suspect that there's capacity in the efficiencies gained. There's automation, and not particularly number 2, but up into number 3. Mr. Chair, if I can go to number 3, represents sort of embedded positions that have been there for eons. And so I think that the blending particular is that I would rather see administrative work done by administrators, grant administration oversight, some of that stuff. And so what I believe is happening is that the accountants are picking up sort of that slack as we pull back labors in other areas and try to force efficiencies. Perhaps that gets dumped down in pretty expensive labor. So no, the answer is no. I don't anticipate sending it over to finance, but 31, 40 CPA accountant type number crunchers over in that department. I think if you force the question, I think you'd see some efficiencies.
Appreciate that.
Yeah, so number 3, again, you look at in the DHSS in particular, a lot of grant money moves through that department. You've got 2 accountants, and the bolded in quotes is also where we show our historical trends, I believe, on what they're called, how they're paid, where they're done. So when I'm not putting it in there with accountants to be facetious, it's to show the differences of naming. For example, they're called senior accountant in employee relations. A brand new position, you're already putting a senior accountant in there. In DHSS, the accountant position, 100% government funded. There's a senior staff accountant embedded in there. Again, accounting clerk 2 and 3. Perhaps not so bad in the clerks, but again, if a good portion is grant administration and grant oversight, my perspective would be rather treated like the state does, where they centralize that grant administration program and pull it out of the departments. If I can move on to number 4.
Mr. Starr, before you continue,
Sure.
I have a question just for clarification. So your intent is to delete these accounting positions within this department?
Yes.
And use the accountants in the controller's office?
Absolutely.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Mr. Starr. Please continue.
And again, the IT department, again, this is more example. In the past, there used to be communications people in each embedded, and I think you lose some central cohesiveness when you allow independence to occur, perhaps even some fiduciary oversight is occurring. And again, this isn't a new position. The IT budgetary functions have been embedded for quite some time with an accountant and a senior staff accountant. A lot of horsepower, $250,000 sitting there crunching some numbers that potentially could be automated. We've seen quite a bit of that. So the trend is to force the question.
Ms. Johnson has a question, Mr. Starr.
So I have, one question I have as far as the new position, and I'm not sure if the administration can answer this, for the employee relations. I mean, I like where you're going with this. That tends to be because we're self-insured. I'm not sure about the specificity of that accounting position. And so it'd be interesting to find out if we have the caliber or if we have the
If I may, I believe you're going to see, if you find comparisons to other managements of the fund, the 603s and some of those that disperse that, their office, OMB's office in particular, in my past experience, has been more than qualified. They do it for other departments, and so I think if you really want good accuracy, good trending, and good fiduciary oversight, centralize it. If this trend is to continue that we're going to diversify, I think you're going to lose track of in this case, a very expensive type of program, fund management, and medical and dental.
Yeah. Then the other part of this, as you're looking at each of these positions, and as I said, I understand where you're going. Have you looked at it in terms of SAP and the backfill of those positions? I mean, I'm wondering, and I'm not quite sure because, as you know, a good part of SAP is going to be capital and not as much operational. But have you had discussions with the administration as far as how this would?
No, and again, I probably should have. What I did a lot of it was comparing previous budget books, through my experience in 8 years, looking at the positions that have just sort of occurred and when they need to fall off.
Mm-hmm.
And so, to answer your question, I think you're going to see additional gains and savings with the SAP model.
Oh,
I don't want to
once it
say
goes live, but
that
this
these
is
positions
years.
shouldn't do, but you may see an encumbrance or a resistance perhaps from these methodologies of change because, hey, we've been doing it this way forever.
Right.
So are we seeing the SAP modeling encumbered or slowed down because we have resistance here?
And not to debate, but this is really questions. My question is not so much, I mean, I agree. If we have a fully functional ERP, there's going to be huge efficiencies from it. But my question is, as we're looking at the 2 years before it goes live, and then 6 months to a year before, all the.
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that.
But so it'd be an interesting discussion. Again, probably you're right. Wouldn't have to necessarily be in the departments, but how would we mesh this with SAP?
I don't know if the accounting and finance challenges are going to be different as SAP comes online. Again, my point is the 53 people over in finance and the controller's office. It's a lot of horsepower, as well as the embedded nature of it. And I guess with 5 and 6, you look at the planning department has an embedded principal accountant, and in this case, public transportation has a senior accountant. There's plenty of other departments, Parks and Rec, operations and maintenance, they don't have accountants, and equally, perhaps in some cases, larger budgets. I didn't go after every one of them, by the way. There were some departments like PM&E, which goes hand in hand with some of their project management, where they have to watch change orders, they have to watch accounting a little quicker perhaps. But, you know, again, it's not something that I take lightly in terms of perhaps there's names associated with that. It had nothing to do with personalities or
No.
PCNs. It has to do with, do we have the capacity somewhere else? And as we look into it, we've done a good job over the last 5 years of pulling out things. Perhaps Amy will talk about supplies, but now we're starting to need to get into the meat of it, and I don't take it lightly.
Thank you,
So-
Mr. Starr. Before you continue, thank
Sure.
you, Ms. Johnson, and I'd like to recognize Marilyn Banza, our OMB, Deputy OMB Director, and I would ask you to please join us at the table. Thank you, Mr. Steele.
Yeah, my question was, we heard yesterday that we're not going to do the accounting module or the budgeting module in the new SAP, but this is a lot of experience. And we had a problem last time we went through this last year with expertise within the department doing the work. I mean, they have to whatever the issue was. I'm just concerned, and I'd like the administration to address it at some point, that there's some expertise here.
Oh, yeah, I wouldn't beg to differ with you, Mr. Steele, on that. I think that what I find is the expertise should be centralized and brought into the finance and controller department, where they have the best fiduciary responsibility to OMB discussions. Planning and the planning services department, the amendment here that you're looking at, has got really, you know, fairly routine functions. They take a lot of cash, they move a lot of dollars. They watch some of that. I wouldn't be flippant in that I know exactly what they do, but if some of the words are, well, I watch over those grants, or I'm grant funded. Two problems that I see with grant funded positions is that it pulls away from the grant itself. And then the other thing is, really, is that what you want a $150,000 burden employee to be doing, is grant administering? It's relatively routine once the grant is administered and taken. So I think you're needing to look at where embedded positions have been for so long and look at the focus of change. It's been painful when we did the communications, was replaced a lot by our website communications and our discussions back and forth. The IT functions automated and centralized under the IT functions, and every department lost their IT connection, fear that the computers were going to crash, and all that never happened. So my point is here is, okay, fine, move them over to finance then if we don't want to cut them all, but certainly let's get them to where they can be managed through the functions that they do.
Mr. Starr, before you continue,
Yep.
I just have one comment,
Absolutely.
and everybody probably realizes this, but if you remember, for the 2015 budget, we approved funding for some of these accounting positions because of SAP. So I just wanted to remind
Well,
everyone
I would
of
beg
that.
to differ, Madam Chair, that only one of these is the ER funded position. So the ones that I'm proposing that we remove have been embedded in government as far as I can tell back 3 or 4 years.
Okay.
So the idea that they're sort of new in that may be very true, but I didn't pick on some of those ones that had that, and picking on them is probably the wrong word, but I left that to be because those are policy statements that we made. These particular ones seem to be just more of the same. Let's just keep doing it the way we've been doing it, kind of force that discussion, force that change.
Okay, thank you. Which one? are
I'm
we
already
on
up to
now?
number 7.
Number 7, thank you.
And this one has a little bit of opinion, and perhaps those that have been around me for some time. We're going to have tighter budgets. We're going to have tighter functions. We're going to have expectations from our public that we're doing core and vital services. I believe that. I think in particular in my districts, we're seeing pullbacks on typical grant functions that allowed us a lot of freedom to do things that we really, really wanted to do. Far-reaching, global, well, let's look ahead. Boy, isn't that going to be great that we can do Ship Creek redevelopment, or we can do a expanded port development. My comment here, and it's full of friction certainly, is that do we want to fund our police department, or do we want long-range planners? If you open your budget books and can study both divisions, there's a planning department that does Erica McConnell work, Title 21, all that stuff. I'm leaving all of that alone. Same with the plan review, same with all the other stuff. It's the embedded planner, long-range planners, and Mr. Flynn and Mr. Trainey and all that have them and keep them. I've got a stack full of plans that cost us a lot of money. And they're not bad, they're great. They don't get used very often. And quite frankly, the ones that are generated, in my opinion, that are generated by contracted labor, outsourced labor, tend to be much more contemporary, full of new ideas. And it's not to say these folks don't bring value. My comment is, I believe you when you outsource, you don't have a recurring employee year to year to year trying to find work for them. Our priorities on district plans and neighborhood plans need to ease up a little bit. We gotta catch up. We got East Side District Plan sitting down there. The Upper Hillside neighborhood stuff is underway. We're not even ready to talk town centers out of the comp plan yet. So I think it's time to say, hey, now it's time. We've done a good job of cutting supplies and other efficiencies. We're gonna have to go after labor. And it's a $500,000, basically over 4 positions. There's 7 long-range planners. Do we really need a full-time manager at $150,000? I leave in there, if you read in there, there's still a long-range planner, there's still an associate planner, and several administrative functions to carry on the routine work. I don't gut the department. So that's my take. That's all I have.
Thank you, Mr. Starr. Mr. Bosky?
Okay, I want to start by saying please be patient with me. What I find in budgeting often is continuation budgets happen a lot. And I think sometimes we have to go back and we have to scrub for the nickels and dimes. And I spent many, many hours doing this. And just looking at nickels and dimes, I think we can save the taxpayers over $850,000 in nickels and dimes without significantly impacting departments. I did not go after any specific positions. It was really looking in the couch cushions to see where we could actually be critical in some of these departments. You'll also notice that there's multiple departments I did not touch because I looked at how they scrubbed their numbers and they did exactly what I was trying to do already. So some of those departments have already done those things. Another department that I really tried to hold harmless in this budget was Parks and Rec, and it's because historically, when I looked at the Parks and Rec department budget over the past, I would say 7 years or so, I think this department has taken a significantly bigger hit than any other department in the city. And as I was looking at it, I think in Maryland, this is why I brought you up here, I wanted to ask you, my recollection was their budget over the past 7-8 years has diminished over 50%. Do you know if that is an accurate number?
I don't know if that is accurate.
Can you just look into it for me? Because I don't want to say something that's not true, but in my mind, for some reason, 54% is coming in, but I couldn't find the number from that long ago, but.
And the specific time span again?
Probably, let's just look at the last 7 or 8 years. Yeah, and I think it helps to give context, to understand that they're still providing services to all the parks facilities around the city, but they have a much smaller crew that's doing the work. So that's the reason I held that department harmless. All right, so I am amendment number 8. Okay, so I tried to group it for everyone into specific things. First was travel, and then was equipment and supplies, and then
You're
what?
number 8.
You're in number
You're number 8
Yeah.
first.
Okay, so the first one, sorry, is the mayor's office. And I know Mr. Evans has an amendment that does the same thing, but I essentially looked at the community grant program, and I retained those programs that I think will have long-term effect in diminishing more expensive crime down the road. So one was the Anchorage Youth Court, and the other was Covenant House. I think both of these are investments that are valuable on the front end for the taxpayers, and on the back end, I think will diminish costs to the community. So I retain those 2 grant awards, but the rest of them I am recommending for property tax relief.
Mr. Trainee?
So you're not gonna support Campfire getting their
You know, honestly, I'm glad you brought that one up because that one I was completely on the fence about, and I would be willing to add that amount back in for Campfire. I was on the fence about it, but I was hoping somebody would bring it up because I would be willing to amend that and add it in.
I mean, I can understand your youth courts and your Covenant House, but the critical kids they serve, otherwise we're gonna have problems with these kids out on the street.
I think that's a fair assessment, Mr. Trainee, and that's the one like I said, I was really torn on that one, but I was hoping somebody would bring it up because.
Thank you,
Madam
Mr.
Chair, I have
Trainee.
a question.
Mr.
So
Starr?
if you could provide some information on the ML&P contributions typically that occur direct writing there, and then also specific, does ASD give Campfire any money? That would be my other question. Thank you.
And Mr. Starr, if I can just follow up real quickly.
Thank you.
In our revenue report we got, there is, this past Tuesday, there's a list of all the nonprofits, and it includes ML&P's contributions too, so you may want to take a look at.
To who
that
they
on
went to, or
Tuesday.
just the total dollars?
Who they went to, the dollars, all of it, it's a
All right.
spreadsheet in that item. that was
Yeah,
on
well,
the-
maybe they owe it the ASD question on Campfire support.
Thank you. Mr. Flynn?
Appreciate the comment. Campfire, Ms. son was on stage yesterday.
Yes, we saw your son yesterday.
Well, welcoming 600 people to a fundraising breakfast for Campfire. Anyway, just for information, I don't want to get into debate, but the community grant program was a significant topic. Mr. Starr, Greg Jackson, Mr. Johnson recall this when we were in a pretty tough spot. It was about 6 years ago now, and the administration's plan at the time was to basically gut it. We had a lot of discussion around this. A lot of these grants are pretty small. They have the advantage of leveraging other monies that we might not have access to, or nonprofits might not have access to otherwise. And we ultimately came to the decision to keep it more or less, not entirely, but more or less intact. So I understand your thoughts on this, Mr. Bosky. I just put a lot of effort into this all those years ago, and I'd be hard pressed to let that work go to seed. So,
Thank you, Mr. Finn. Mr. Bosky?
Thank you. So, Rose, if you would for me, I would ask you to prepare substitute amendments to add campfire back in, and that's the one I'll move. I won't move amendment 8. I'll move a substitute. So my next amendment,
This is Mr. Evans' amendment. Ms. Johnson, would you like to do Mr. Evans' amendments? If not, I'll be happy to do it. Doesn't matter.
I mean, it's pretty self-explanatory.
Well,
Okay.
I'll be happy to do it. Mr. Evans has proposed an amendment to eliminate funding from the Mayor's Municipal Grant Program in the amount of $730,500. Thank you, Mr. Bosky, you're next.
thank you. This one, we all knew it was gonna come back. It's a discussion that I expect, I know where it's gonna go, but I think it's one that we need to have. And
Was this dramatic music or?
Man, that was perfect timing. Whoever called
It's
for
your
it. Exactly.
constituent.
That's a $20 fine, right?
I know. I was gonna say, it's a
Okay,
constituent.
Mr. Bosky, you're done next.
Amendment number 10 is to diminish the police department's budget by $1 million. This is a $1 million decrease of a portion of the additional funding proposed for the first year of the new recruit positions. The previous police chief and administration both indicated if we change the SRO program from 4 10-hour shifts to 8 5-hour shifts, we could still maintain the coverage at the schools. But those 8 other police officers would be freed up to basically go back on the street. So I think this is a win-win. We save the money, but I think it creates a model for the SRO program that's not only approachable, it's not only, what's the word I'm looking for? It's not only achievable, that's the word I'm looking for. But I think long-term, it will create a maintainable program that we can afford. And we all know how short we are on police officers. If we can take 8 experienced police officers and put them in other divisions, whether it's traffic or drug or patrol, I think this is a win-win for everybody. So I didn't want this budget season to go back without us talking about it. This is not about eliminating the SRO program. This is about being smart with our management of resources, and that's why I put this amendment forward.
Ms. Johnston?
Just a question to the administration on this. Would we be able to do this with our current agreement with the police union?
To chair off, find out.
No, that's a question.
Yeah, we'll find out, yeah.
That'd be great,
Well,
thank
and
you.
Ms. Johnston, I can tell you, we've had this conversation come up many times. I spoke with Chief Neely and the previous administration, and both said it would be achievable. They just have to have a letter of agreement with the union, and I articulated that in the amendment. So if it's achieved, I think not only will the police get their 20 new recruits, because we'll have the cost savings, but we'll still maintain the program. And if it's not achieved, that money would come from the opposed new accrued foods from last year, so I have it all right there.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson, Mr. Bosky, Mr. Steele.
Yeah, I disagree with the basic assumption. If you're just talking about service at the high schools, that's one thing. But these officers also provide service to middle schools and elementary schools, critical service, in talking with principals. We just had an event at West High where you had both officers involved. And when you had the one there, you might have a different outcome. And I think it is by far one of the most successful programs that we have from.
Madam Chair, I may have been guilty of it as well too. If we can just keep it to exchange of information, not to say that we shouldn't, but I don't want to duke it out either.
And I want to say to you, Mr. Sir, thank you for your comment. I appreciate that, and that's what we'll do. Keep it to, a point. Thank you, Mr. Steele. Mr. Flynn.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is actually, so I spent some time on this issue too. And if Chief Tolley and his staff can look at an agreement to change from 410s to 5/8s, I think that'd be terrific. But this sort of gets into the structure of the administration, which is, in my opinion, somewhat outside the bounds, and we'll kind of have to have that same conversation around some of Mr. Starr's amendments. It's more of a structural issue as opposed to an allocation issue, and so, whatever the language around it is, it's basically just saying, hey, we're going to pull $1 million out of the police department, which is a conversation worth having. And we all have our ideas about how those savings would be achieved, but ultimately it falls to these characters to figure it out. So I just caution us, and I'm guilty of it too.
I couldn't say you didn't.
I'm guilty of it too, but if we ever get to my amendment, but we need to sort of be cognizant of the fact that these are we allocate, they go in a game.
Madam Chair, I think the technical is we appropriate by department, and they allocate based on their perceptive needs, so it wasn't to be critical. I think the verbiage is important. So we appropriate by department.
And as Mr. Starr reminded us, we're not going to be debating, we're just going to make comments and move on. Mr. Bosky, please continue.
Thank you. And so I just want to recapture part of the context here. I've talked to legal, and I've been told I can appropriate down to a paperclip if I wanted to. So my intent here, I clearly gave a path of where I believe we could save $1 million, but I put the line item in of where it's coming from, so I think it's appropriate within the assembly context. But I know this has been a hot potato, and I'm excited that there's new administration because I want them to take a new look at the program to see if they really could save money and maintain the program, because I think a lot of us want to maintain the program. So that was my intent.
Just one quick comment before we continue. Our work session is scheduled for 1 hour, but there's no reason why we can't go past that hour, and we're probably going to. So be prepared. Thank you.
That's all.
Okay, the next one is amendment number 11.
Amendment number 11, we had this here last year, we brought it back again this year. The problem with animal control has not gone down. We've added more people, more pets. This is an attempt to take care of the problem that exists over there with the contractors. Need more officers in the street. Yes,
Mr.
Mr.
Flynn?
Flynn.
Just a question for the administration. But presuming this is the only amendment that passes, which I don't think it will be the only one, but let's just say it is, do we have headroom under the tax amendment?
No, not at this time.
Thank you.
Let me follow up with that. Mr. Wilbur, yesterday in our budget committee, you made some comments about a whole bunch of savings,
If I could repeat
almost to
that.
$500,000 because of the fines and fees, the change to the fines and fees ordinance. So what's the story?
Okay, so so if this was the only one, what we have right now is based on the fines and fees, the amount would be increased by about $117,000. We have some other department proposals proposals that are gonna be about, or from one department, be about maybe 40 or 50,000. And then we have some others that'll be around 200, so Ms. Gray Jackson is right. So the sum of those three would be like 350,000. So if, my mistake, it would fit if this was the only one in. When we proposed the budget, we had about 186,000 in wiggle room remaining. But when we made the adjustment, or when we agreed to the adjustment for the pre-funding, that adjustment basically took away all of that available funding from the 165. So I stand corrected. So if this is about 300,000, this would be in sum, and we might have a little bit more. But I'm waiting to see what else you have prepared, and want to bring this to the administration as well. So
Thank you, Mr. Wilbur. Mr. Flynn, anything else?
No, when we get to Ms. Domboski's next amendment.
Okay, when we get to it. So right now, we're on amendment number 12.
Yeah, can I just comment about 11?
Certainly.
And it's, one of your titles also is management, and so the idea that efficiencies also are times we communicate our budget efficiencies. And my feeling is if you based an officer under contract in Chugach, Eagle River, you would eliminate a tremendous amount of STEM time. There's a lot of guys they spend on the road, they report to work, and then they drive for a while out there. We have a fairly good call volume, large animal response and all that stuff. In our Valley River Center, which the municipality owns half that building, there's a tremendous amount of space, including warm storage. Probably couldn't store animals in compound or anything like that, but I'm sure we could do a veterinary contract. But I think there's some efficiencies to be gained on that, as well as response times. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Starr. Mrs. Bosky?
And Madam Chair, if you'll allow me, I just want to tell Lance too, another building to evaluate in Eagle River is the old Fire Station 11. I'm not sure what that's even being used for now other than warm storage, but it has offices and everything. So that would be something that may be of interest to the administration.
Thank you, Mr. Bosky. Okay, the next amendment is number 12, and it's offered by Mr. Evans. And it is a reduction in the amount of $223,176, and it's a 1-year travel moratorium, and he states removal of budgets in each listed department dedicated to travel. And the source of funding is property tax. Amendment number 13, Mr. Bosky.
Thank you. This, during the budget committee meeting yesterday, Lance indicated that we potentially could have $7 million in unallocated fund balance. My intent when I started, I was thinking about the ML&P dividend of $7 million we weren't getting, and I'm trying to find a way to offset that in a real way with numbers to property tax relief, and so that's how I picked the number. To be honest, in combination with all my other amendments. So.
Thank you, Mr. Bosky. Mr. Starr?
Mr. Wilburn, following up with the number, if you could also kind of talk about our compliance with the assembly policy on emergency reserves as well. It's not to say that
all met.
Doesn't have fungibility, but under what capacity? 2 and 10, or what did we decide?
Yeah, 2, 10, and the remaining that we have intact for those years that haven't been litigated.
Yeah, the previous administration is saying that our bonding agencies are really sensitive to that, and even are saying that 10 and the other numbers aren't adequate yet for that. So we want to be cautious that we don't end up in an area just because we haven't, that we use it.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Appreciate that.
Thank you, Starr. Just one comment, Mr. Bosky. I really think that your amendment and this would be more appropriate, and probably the legal way to do it is at first quarter, because this is $5 to $7 million, well, $7 million that we anticipate being let go at the end of this year. It's not money that's in fund balance right now, that's an anticipation. So my recommendation would be that you bring it forward doing first quarter budget revision, because I don't think it could even happen right now. But with that said, Ms. Banzoff, you were going to get a number for me of available uncommitted fund balance today. Do you have that number?
Yes, we communicated with the controller division because they are actually the keepers of the fund.
Right.
balance, and we just received that probably 20 minutes before this
Okay.
meeting. So we can provide that to you either after this meeting, one-on-one, or.
Do you have it right now, the number right now? Because I'm sure everybody's interested.
Yeah. Actually,
What's that number?
the
Uncommitted.
The uncommitted at this time is 4.6 million. And the reason being is the release of the tax, the tax reserve
Tax
is
reserve.
related to the settlement, or related to the litigation. So that is,
But if I can follow up, I
Yes.
thought that $4.6 million from tax was being used to fund the 2016 budget.
it is.
Right, so
it is
what's
proposed.
available
So.
uncommitted that we can use
So
if we
that-
wanted to?
Okay, okay, so that
Yeah.
is a proposed amount, so we got 4.5 proposed to be used in 2016. And so the available balance would be about 100,000.
Okay, that's the number that I was looking for. So there's right now 100,000 available in fund balance. Okay, thank you, Mr. Mbosky. Mr. Flynn?
I think Ms. Johnson actually had it in mind.
Right.
I'm sorry.
I was gonna do the
I didn't
first
see
quarter
your
budget
hand, Ms.
again.
Johnson. I'm sorry. Do you want to go first or Mr. Flynn?
No, I was gonna say the first quarter budget.
Can I just
Okay.
comment a little bit about the?
As soon as Mr. Flynn is
Oh,
finished,
I
Mr.
thought-
Starr, I'll call
I
on
didn't
you.
know if you-
Mr. Flynn?
Yeah,
You still want to get it
again, I don't want to get into the debate. We have uncommitted fund balance. One of the policy decisions we as a body need to make is whether we use it for tax relief. And we'll call it short term, not to be pejorative. Or one thing that I had hoped to do and failed previously is to boost the municipal trust, which we had to drop our withdrawals from that due to poor market performance in the market crash those years ago. If we can get a little more capital into that, that perhaps provides longer term relief, not as dramatically as this would do. But I think that's something we have to think through before we make a determination on how we use this uncommitted fund balance.
Thank you, Mr. Flynn. Mr. Starr?
Yeah, and there's a little pontificating other than Ms. Gray Jackson and I have a lot of time studying this stuff. I think my comment is that I'm a little uncomfortable, and this is opinionated for sure. There's two policies that we've taken in the past. We've either gone all the way up to the tax cap at the end of the year, like we're doing now. And I'm not judging that, I'm just saying we've done two ways. What I want to make sure is that we retain some flexibility, either in tax cap or available spending, a significant amount of it, because things happen. We identify things, and so I'm a little nervous, quite frankly, about going all the way up to the tax cap. That's why I didn't get too jumpy about where do we use the money that we save in terms of filing for tax relief. We just got to be very cognizant that if we go to the tax cap, we need to have some sort of cushion that allows us to ride out the information we're going to learn. Invariably, we change budgets at April, and if they go up, we better have the money to be able to go up, because we won't be able to tax for it if we've already spent it. That's just counseling, but be cautious is all.
Well, thank you, Mr. Starr. Mr. Trang?
Just one thing on this, if we go this route, 65% will go for individual property tax pay relief. 35% goes to commercial property tax relief. So just keep in mind, it doesn't all go to individual property owners.
Good to know.
Thank you, Mr. Trang. Anything else on this one?
No, Madam Chair, but I appreciate the flexibility in the discussion because, like I said, to me, I want to signal to people where I'm thinking, but it's always a learning experience, and I appreciate everyone's comments.
You're welcome, Mr. Wells. Number 14.
Okay, real estate. So in this department, my intent is to remove the travel appropriation. It's only $1,000, which is not significant, but as I said, as we go through all the departments, I try to retain some or all of some travel budgets that were there for departments that I know have to travel. The CFO has to go back to New York to talk to our bond raiders. AFD has to travel to go accept fire engines and fire trucks on an inspection before they're shipped. So as you see, the decisions that I'm making, they were thought out, and it was specific by department and function.
Madam Chair, if I may.
Certainly, Mr. Flynn.
Yeah. First question, do I correctly assume that these sort of, to the extent they're travel reductions,
Yeah.
they are duplicative with Mr. Evans' amendment number 12?
No, they're not the same, because I did not.
I know they're not the same, but basically he's making one.
If his goes through, all my travel amendments are essentially under the point.
Okay, that's,
But I didn't go that route. I actually have specific reasons why I did specific amounts in specific departments.
yeah, no, I appreciate that. I just wanted clarity.
And it's clear. Thank you,
So
Mr. Flynn.
I have one more thing.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and this just is a blanket question for the remainder of the amendments, 14 through 50. To the extent the administration could do a scrub on these and figure out which ones they're comfortable with for the S version, that would be most appreciated. Save us a lot of time.
Thank you, Mr. Flynn. Mr. Dawson?
And Mr. Flynn, I made the same comment yesterday. I talked to the CFO prior to him taking off on an airplane, and I explained in detail what I did, and I asked if they would please review these, because I think they're good amendments, and I think they're fair, and they don't cost any PCNs. You know, I think they're all palatable.
I didn't find any of them that were outrageous. I just thought it was.
Yeah, so my hope was, by me taking this effort, that the administration would adopt them in S version.
And remember, folks, no debate, we've got the story. Thank you. Mr. Boston, please continue.
Okay, internal audit, again, same thing, we're removing the travel appropriation. I think, because I did the setup on the first one, people understand. If you have a specific question, I'll slow down, but I'll just read through. That's
Please.
Okay, traffic. Traffic is one that I actually, in public transportation, what I had a goal in mind when I was looking at travel, I wanted to try to get about $50,000, but at that point I wasn't looking, and so the last two departments that I had were traffic and public transportation, and I assumed because of the technical nature of traffic and because of public transportation and the issues that they have with buses and stuff, I thought they probably do need travel budgets. So the remaining number that I was looking at, I basically divided it between the two departments, and I basically made them split the reduction in travel. That's how I came up with it. I guess I didn't have a real technical. Yeah.
Mr. Starr?
And if you could tell us, and Lance, I know you're the note taker for the administration, so I'd like to know how the administration is going to address the travel requests. The last administration had sort of a travel committee, and so by having it in their budget, does that mean they're automatically going to be able to just draw it and go? Or do they have to say, hey, I'm going to this conference because we have to know? So can you tell us how the administration's going to approve travel? That'd be nice to know. Thank you.
Okay, so that is essentially both for traffic and public transportation, but that's how I came up with those two numbers. Employer relations, I removed the travel appropriation for that department. In library, I removed the increase from this year to last year. I retained the 2015 funding level for the library. In the municipal manager's office, I actually took the lesser cut that I was going to take. I was going to give him parity in travel with the CFO's office. However, I chose to give parity with the Department of Law and make their travel budgets the same. I think the CFO's office is either $7,000 or $8,000, where the Department of Law is $10,000, and so that reduction of $6,128 gives parity between the municipal manager's office and the Department of Law and their travel budget. Amendment number 21, the Equal Rights Commission. I've served on state commissions before, and I know they have travel budgets, and I have found on one very technical commission that I served on, I was able to not only use Skype, but I was able to video conference into the commissions and get a lot of information that way. This commission is very similar to another commission that I served on, and I feel with today's technology that's possible for any continuing education and training, and considering that's why I took that appropriation out. Amendment number 22, information technology. Again, this is the IT department. I think they could leverage technology for any continuing ed or information that they need. Skype is a wonderful tool, and that's why I removed their travel appropriation. But I would like to just comment, throughout you'll see I really didn't touch the IT department very much at all, because they're dealing with SAP, and I chose, just like Parks and Rec, to try to hold them harmless, because I think they'll have a lot of need.
Ms. Johnston?
Just a question on this, the administration or the IT department. I have a feeling some of this is to get Microsoft credits or licensing, and if we could find out if that can be done via technology or if it has to be on site.
Thank you, Ms. Jones.
I think that's a totally fair question, and that's what I say, if more information comes out, you know, I don't have my heart set on a lot of them. I mean, I think they're all good amendments, that's why I offered them, but I think that's all information that I think all of us want, so thank you. Amendment number 23, this is to remove the increase of AFD's travel budget from 2015 to 2016. The notation in the budget book specifically, and I want to be very clear, everybody knows this, but my husband is an AIFF company officer, and this specifically would affect company officer travel. So I just want to put that on record. I'm just trying to go to it very really quick, so I'm tired. Okay, so the budget appropriation in the budget book says increased travel to allow staff development of company officers. And so this is a $10,000 increase over last year. And what I do know is there are a number of classes and development that happens here in the municipality of Anchorage from the state. It also happens in Palmer. And so I don't know, I personally think in the times that we're in right now, increases really should be scrutinized, and I don't really see, I personally haven't seen a justification for it. That's why I removed it.
Mr. Steele?
Is any of that used for recruitment purposes, or do they do recruitment purposes on those training?
Not to my knowledge. I've known people, I don't know if my husband has, but I've known people that have gone on trips for travel, and there's been like 3 or 4 day fire conferences over on the East Coast that I've known firemen to go to. But again, there are opportunities for continuing education and other methods that I don't think will require the increase.
I'm thinking of the advantage that we got when we got that, EMTs took advantage of other people's training to bring them in, and I know that facility
That was local, yep, yeah. And I can tell you, out of the Chugai Volunteer Fire Department, I think there's, don't quote me on the number, but last I spoke with them a couple months ago, there's about 9 state training officers. My husband is a state training officer, but so are a number of guys on AFD. That's why I know there's so many opportunities locally to do training and career build. So it's just, again, it's one of those things, I think before we start increasing, we have to have real justification.
Thank you, Mr. Steele. Mr. Bossy, Mr. Starr?
Yeah, and again, a policy statement from the administration, you know, the fleet management, we do a lot of intergovernmental charges back to the departments that go into fleet. You know, isn't there's a case we made that you could centralize travel and bill back to each department as they requested travel, meaning centralized travel budget of some sort, because it seems a little loose. And I think the centralization, in my opinion, would lend itself to efficiencies. Hey, wait, we already got a guy going to that conference, as opposed to flying all the way back there and seeing your buddy who's AFD and APD. So I just look to perhaps know what the policy is going to be beyond just not only how you're going to administer travel, but why wouldn't you have it in the central budget and governmental charge it back like we do so many other things, computer time, fleet, all the other stuff. Why wouldn't you just charge it as rendered? I'd like to approve just one travel number for the administration, let you guys duke it out. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Starr. Mr. Bossy, number 24.
Thank you. Okay, so this is for the Assembly's budget, and let me look to see what I did. Exactly. I was torn whether I should try to put it back to a previous funding level. And what I settled upon was to make the Assembly's travel budget $25,000. There's 11 Assembly members. Not all of us travel. We obviously some that are on AML or some of those other committees. That's part of it. But I figured with the number of conferences you go to every year, I thought this would be adequate. So that's just my thought.
Thank you. Just for the record, I think everybody knows I've been paying my own way since I've been elected. And most recently, I'm still paying for my own, this year, my own airfare, and I'm only asking the municipality for my hotel. But anyway, just for the record, Mr. Training?
But the assembly budget handles everything from the assembly members to the clerk's office, to the ombudsman's office, to the So you're looking at cutting all that down this year, do you wanna do another cut for those areas?
Those ones, I did not do, additional cuts for those ones. I encompassed it all in this $25,000 appropriation.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Trainee.
I just have
Mr.
a
Starr?
comment. Mr. Chairman, if you could generally give us some leadership talk, sort of how you approve travel requests. I'd also like the same question from our side, as to how it goes. And, you know, I'm going to opinionate just a little bit. It also bothered me because Patrick used to do legislative liaison work out of Juneau. Give us a Danny report, and Mr. Birch would fly down there the next week. And I wonder if that's a chairman's duty. So a policy call there would be helpful, Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Starr. Mr. Flynn?
I did submit a trip report.
You did a very nice one, Patrick,
For the-
best I've seen.
For the first time ever done at LC.
Well, certainly that's your style, and Greg Jackson gives us great representation. Typically, I get feedback that I need. I don't have to travel there.
Yeah, I just feel that, I think if we're gonna flesh out a policy around travel, you know, maybe we just say, if you're gonna go, you've gotta produce a trip report. And then we all know we all benefit from that feedback.
Fair enough.
Thank
I'll
you, Mr.
take care of
Flynn.
it, Bill.
And I always do a trip report, a verbal one. Mr. Boston, please continue.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And the reason I saved the assembly for last when I did it, I had every intention of doing it, but I feel like when we start looking at the cushions for all the nickels and dimes, I think we should be the leadership body. And that's why you see our travel budget. I looked at it, I thought 11 members, and, you know, I was considering the clerk potentially going into the lower 48, you know, on a trip again, but to look at how mail-in elections are done. But I know they've already been once, and it was just a year ago, and I know they gathered a lot of information. And so it was taken into account, but, you know, as Patrick said, you know, when you go, you produce a report, I think that's fantastic, and Ms. Gray Jackson every time tells us in detail what she did. And, you know, I too have been to Juneau, but I'm not on the legislative committee, so I pay for it myself. But, you know, I just think this is a good message to send, so I just would appreciate consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Boston. Number 25?
Employee relations. Okay, now we're into the supply budget. So I went to the employee relations department and I reduced it to the 2014 spending level. The Equal Rights Commission, again, I reduced it to the 2014 spending level. The finance department, I reduced it to the 2015 spending level. If anybody has any specifics why I did it, you know, you can, but I did, you know, make conscious choices. Sometimes there's a level I thought would have been too much of a cut or whatnot, but that's why I didn't, I'm not sure why I did it, but that one's 2000.
Mr. Starr?
Yeah, Mr. Wilbur, I'd like a policy statement as to why you felt it was necessary to increase the supply budgets across the board. If they were underfunded, it was just a oversight that CPI adjusted automatically, or you see a growing employee base that requires additional supplies. You may have to even justify it per department if we're going to go specifically to cutting each department, but I'd like to know where you felt it was necessary to, or why.
Okay.
I'll ask you the same question about furnishers and fixtures as well, unless it's a requirement to maintain the Class A status of this building.
To maintain, I didn't catch the first part.
The furnishings and fixtures, equipment, Ms. Dombrowski also talks about, somebody did talk about equipment and furnishings as well, why we felt necessary to go over and above. There was one-time remodel based on administrative deals, so I'll just get my questions out now, and I won't ask them later. So supply increase and also why equipment budgets and furnishings needed to go up.
Thank you, Mr. Boston.
Thank you, and I'd also like to just give you another glimpse into my thought process. With some of the budgets that are continuation budgets, they're the exact same number as last year. I feel sometimes when we budget like that, it's because we're not critically looking at what we actually need versus just plugging in a number. So those were definitely ones that I scrutinized heavily. So they're kind of in there. The finance part we talked about. The municipal attorney's budget, again, I returned it to the 2014 spending level. Traffic department, I reduced it by 1%, their supply budget. Library, I reduced it to the 2015 funding level. And this is one, the library department, and there may be justification, so I'll look for information from the, anybody who knows, or the administration. But the library was one of the few departments where we actually saw increases in both travel and supply. And so I don't understand why those were increases, but there may be a good justification for it. So I'll look forward to that conversation, but just to let you know, I did reduce it to the 2015 level.
Mr. Flynn?
Just for information, we've held those budgets pretty flat for a while. And kind of been a library advocate. I did hear from some of the folks who support the library and said they were coming, not municipal folks, but, you know, nonprofit types, you know, the Library Foundation or so on. They were comfortable with the library budget, but indicated they might actually be coming back to us at first quarter. I haven't seen what that looks like, but just offer that for information.
Thank you, Mr. Flynn. I had similar communication. Mr. Starr first, and then Mr.
Yeah, and again, my question,
Peterson.
you might be on this one particularly allowed to be perhaps by department, why you feel that they need to go up, if in fact they do need to go up. So if you can address each individual amendment, or if your S-version captures it differently, if you're gonna do an S-version, that would be great. I have, also the comment to be careful that, previous appropriations, capital projects don't somehow get blended in the need for, I better get those supplies because Hanson system upgrades, whether buying computers or whatever, we do a fine job, I think, of appropriating capital dollars for program expansion. And so the department leaders seem to think that they need to gussy that up with supply. I'm not saying they do, but, you know, the $24,000 cut to the supply budget, in some of these other departments. Remember, we're capitalizing them pretty strong elsewhere. SAP, Hanson system upgrades, the E-plans. I mean, we've spent big money in those, so ideally they have a capital dollar expense account to get money that they need. All of our reasons, centralized finance. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Starr. Mr. Peterson, and then Mr. Steele.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just was wondering if this didn't have something to do with the remodeling that is going on over at the library at the Act. You don't know, just thought I'd throw it out there.
I will find out. I
Thank
know
you,
that.
Mr. Peterson.
That was my comment too, in terms of they're making so many changes to the new book return, and they're handling all those books right now with a remodel. The question is there a need, an increase?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Steele. Mr.
Thank
Belsky?
you. And I think one thing we have to remember is when we're in categories, when we're talking about supplies, what are the categories as supplies? So we're not talking about capital improvements. So when I look at stuff like this, there's definitely a differentiation between equipment and furnishings for supplies. So what is each department using for supplies? You know, if you see a cut in supplies of, $700, can we get our pens and paper clips cheaper? Can we do something more efficiently? And I think what it does, rather than continuation budgets and forces people just to buy a whole bunch of something to spend it, I think it forces us all just to take a second look. So.
Thank you. Just one comment. I think when it comes to the library and supplies, that supplies means periodicals, tapes, movies, books, that kind of thing. And that's what I'm thinking. But anyway, please continue.
Yeah. And so again, that's going to be, and the reason I highlighted the questions that I have in the library so heavily is because those are all questions that I think will be helpful for all of us for the administration to answer. Okay, this is what they're using. And it was the one department that I did see increases. So I'm just trying to understand where they're from, and if we don't have good justification, try to hold them to last year's level, essentially. The next one is the Public Works Administration, and my proposal is to reduce their supply budget by 1%. This was a continuation budget, the exact same numbers last year, so I think sometimes when we do that, we could probably be a little bit more creative and maybe competitive in the things we buy. Amendment number 32, Development Services. My proposal is to reduce their supply budget to the 2014 level. The Municipal Manager's Office, again, reduce their supply level to the 2014 level. Project Management and Engineering. I didn't want to go all the way back to the 2014 level. Instead, I just did an even $30,000. But again, the intent was try to kind of get a little bit back there. And again, it's just the totality of what we're doing.
Mr. Starr?
Marilyn, can you confirm, not today, but in other times, just generally, are we choosing the right fund source to reimburse if some of these pass? For example, PM&E vastly is supported by other projects, including bond money. So my question is are we right in that assumption that it's going to credit back to property taxes? Generally, I don't know if you need to go every department based on those changes, but generally there, as well as, for example, the fire service area comes into play with the property tax rebate. You know, it's nice to say property tax rebate, but those that aren't in the fire service area wouldn't necessarily pay into that fund that supplies the uniform reimbursement. So just generally, did we get our funds correct, especially for some of them that have value inside the administration? If they pass, are we truly giving property tax release, or are we missing it somewhere? No offense, Ms. Dombowski.
No, that's a
it
good question.
Could be critical.
Thank you, Mr. Starr. Mr. Boswell?
Oh, I absolutely don't take offense. And this was one of the departments that caught my eye, and I should have asked the question last year, and I didn't. But in 2014, their supply budget was $28,498. In 2015, it jumped all the way to $65,000. And so again, and then we just did a continuation budget to $65,000. So was there a need for a one-time purchase in 2015? That was and that's why I said, if we just continue a budget just to continue it, my question is, there's a huge jump. If 2014 was adequate, why don't we just go back to it? This may have been a one-time supply that we just didn't notice. So, PME, that's why you see such a large supply hit there. Health and Human Services, again, this is to reduce the budget to the 2014 funding level. So again, this is one you see a big jump in last year. Okay, and the fire department. This is one, again, I just made my disclosure, but y'all know my husband uses uniforms. But this is an increase to their uniform budget. And considering that right here, it says,
Replacement?
yeah, increase for the uniform replacement program. So they already have money that they plug in, and that's how much, but this is an increase to that program. And so I want to understand, you know, I took it out just because I think wherever we can stretch a little bit, we should, because I think we should kick the tires, but this is one I'm sure that we'll have some discussion.
Mr. Trainee?
Lance, this is the contract item, the contract we have with the firefighters to put this money in. What?
For union replacement.
Mr. Trainee, I think that Ms. English will be able to answer that question, because as a matter of fact, we asked it. Ms. English, could you answer that question for us, please?
Yes, actually, it's in the contract that they provide uniforms and also the protective equipment and whatnot. So there is a contract requirement to provide the clothing. The chief determines what's needed.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Mr. Flynn?
Yeah. And I don't need an answer today, but I was just curious. I think I may have heard the answer. Are we talking about dress uniforms? Are we talking about turnouts?
Shorts, t-shirts, whatever. Yeah, that's a good question. And that's why I said this is not contractually, this is not eliminating the uniform program. This is an increase to it. So we need understanding of what the increase is.
Yeah, what are we buying with this money?
Exactly.
Because if it's turnouts, then
That's
I got an
not
issue.
enough. Well, I gotta tell you, if that's turnouts, it's not enough. I mean, we provide 2 sets of turnouts for all drivers.
Thank you, Mr. Flynn. Mr. Trainee?
Just want to make sure, Amy, that the contract increase amount is not factored into the contract, because we can't do that. But it's not in the contract, we could.
It's a very fair question, and like I said, you see, I put a lot of thought and effort into a lot of these, because I think they're questions that we need to talk about, and we as a body need to vet to see if it's appropriate.
Thank you, Mr. Trainee. Mr. Steele?
Yeah, my company was we had a huge fire season in Alaska in general last year. And I think there's probably some agreements, I mean, I did work on some of this, some of those fires and those types of fire damage.
Well, thank you, Mr. Steer, and if I may just make a clarifying point. So, they actually, when they go on those fires, they all have assigned forestry uniforms, totally different from their everyday stuff.
And I just have one comment. Let's keep in mind that there's a fire academy for 2016, so this may very well have something to do with that. Mr. Bosky, please continue.
Management and budget, Lance, you didn't escape my pen either. I'm asking to reduce your supply level to 2015. It's $285. Again, I was hoping I wouldn't be criticized or mocked by bringing forward small amendments because I was looking for nickels and dimes and it does all that up. So, I'm hopeful you will be willing to accept that one.
Lance, I got that 285, don't worry. Please continue.
Again, I did the same thing with CFO's office budget, amendment number 38. It's to reduce the supply budget by 1%, which is $300. Real estate services, again, I briefly let them know yesterday that I was gonna be offering these couple of amendments. I would like them to reduce their supply budget by $580. It's 1%. Purchasing, a 1% reduction, which is $606. The mayor's office, 1%, $650. Internal audit, this would reduce their supply budget just above their 2014 level. Health and Human Services, now we're into equipment and furnishings. I've reduced their supply budget by $2,100 $2,187. Real estate services, reduced the equipment and furnishing budget just above the 2014 level. Employee relations, again, it's a $2,900 reduction to their furnishings budget. Public Works, this would reduce their furnishing budget to just over the 2014 level. Maintenance and operations, reduce their furnishing budget by about $3,300. The municipal manager's office, I reduced his budget by about $5,500. And I think part of the thing we have to recognize in the municipal manager's budget with the restructuring of the municipality, they don't have nearly as many departments that are reporting to them either. And I don't know, I thought his budget was pretty high, so. Internal audit, we're on number 49 now. This would reduce their furnishing budget by $500. And PME is the last one, and that would reduce their equipment and furnishing budget by about $840. So altogether, like I said, as just counting nickels and dimes, if you don't count the SRO discussion, I think we were able to find approximately $850,000 in savings.
Thank you, Mr. Bosky. Mr. Training?
Mr. Bosky, I looked through all these. I appreciate what you've done, but I didn't see the sum department reduction in supply.
Oh, I'm glad you brought that up. The reason I didn't, I was thinking about the clerk's office and how intensive and all the different things the clerk's office acquires. And I did over proportionally cut our travel budget, and that's the reason I held the assembly department harmless in the supply area. But I would be more than happy to support a reduction in the assembly supply budget. But I was thinking about the clerk's office and elections and all the extra things that go into it. And that's specifically why the reason I didn't reduce their supply.
I'm just thinking, if we can do 1%, things like the mayor's office, municipal manager's been hard to which includes not just the assembly, but the
Mr. Trainee, would you
our lawyer,
would you be willing to co-sponsor that amendment with me?
didn't say I was willing to do that. I'm just saying I was wondering why they were left out,
Yeah,
ma'am.
that's the only reason is because I over proportionally cut the travel budget.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Training.
Thank you.
Mr. Starr?
Yeah, as it relates to the assembly spending plans, when it comes to that kind of stuff, I've been irritated at times when I've needed a printed copy of Title 21. Well, that costs money, so, you know, it's like, whose budget do they take it out of? Ultimately, does that just default if I put that request into that, or does that come out of the planning department's budget? So perhaps you can tell me how the assembly treats those requests. I don't ask for them just so I can put them on my shelf, nor do I hand them out, but oftentimes for just committee work or for other purposes thereof, I need a printed copy, and I'd like to know who we IGC back to.
Right, and you just said it, Mr. Starr, for stuff like that, it's an IGC, it goes into the budget. Mr. Steele?
Yeah, this is, I get my pens from my desk, so.
No, I get mine from the bank. Can you
Well,
just
I buy
validate
mine
really that we're
home, so-
IGCing appropriately, Mr. Trainee?
You was there?
Just the IGC is appropriate.
Okay.
I don't mind coming out of my budget, but I haven't used my budget since I started, so.
No, you're very thrifty.
Conservative.
Thank you, Mr. Training, Mr. Starr. Mr.
Thank
Bosky?
you.
Thank you. I just wanted to, and I talked to the chair and the vice chair and Lance about this. I still have some questions into OMB and the administration. regarding a couple of issues. So I do have a couple more amendments that aren't drafted yet, just because we don't know exactly how much and where the money's housed. But I don't want to, shock anybody in that. I am going to be bringing forward a couple more amendments for that, for the budget. But for the most part, like I said, I was really hoping that I would have patience and people would be open-minded when I came forward with all these amendments, because I think it's just a good exercise for us to go through.
Thank you, Mr. Bosky. And just so, in case you didn't see it, there's a summary that Rose put together on our behalf that shows the totals for the general government operating budget, proposed amendments. So I just want to make sure everybody got a copy of that. With that said,
Madam Chair, can I ask a question?
Certainly, Mr. Starr.
Mr. Wilbur, seeing as you're just taking over the helm on this department, typically or traditionally or sometimes we see an S version. I was wondering the timing of that, because oftentimes I can pull my jets on it if I know you guys feel comfortable with one or the other, or if I have to go out and lobby support or do more research. So what's your timing, do you think, on how we're going to do we have a work session on the 20th?
Yeah, if I can
Next
tell
Friday.
you, next Friday on the work session, that work session is basically to go over our amendments and the administration's response and their substitute version of the ordinance.
Yeah, I didn't know if
We
it
got
was
that
pending
covered.
or if it was legitimate, but if
It's
that's what you're gonna do,
legitimate,
then.
yeah.
Okay, is that your answer then? You think you'll just tender to us on Friday?
Yeah, that would be our plan. We present.
Thank you, Mr. Starr. Okay, let's go to the next set of amendments, and this one is community development. Ms. Johnston?
Yes, I think you remember when the enterprise units were giving their reports, and there was $162,000 increase in their budget, and it was a placeholder. And I would prefer they come back first quarter budget revisions if that's something that is necessary and what it's for. And we've had Community Development Authority do all sorts of things in the past that they are able to do, but tennis courts, malls. So I just want to have an idea.
Who gives us the answer? I'm sorry to overtread you, but do we get that from Mr. Halcro or do we get that from the administration?
I would say that it's Development Authority that would say one way or other, because it doesn't come out of property taxes.
Zero.
No, that's what they said in the work session.
I see.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson. Mr. Starr, Mr. Bosky?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll just say it now because we're on the Community Development Authority, but our representative has requested the audit. Remember the parking garage that they needed? Last year we had the discussion about the big parking garage and how much money that was going to cost. I don't see, I've been asking for the engineer's report. If that because I may have a budget amendment, but I just haven't seen the report yet. So that's another thing, Lance, if you could make sure to get for us.
And it is the engineer's report from ACDA regarding the garage.
So last year, the ACDA was wanting to put $800,000 to cover the East High tennis courts.
Okay.
And at that time, they had a huge liability because they were waiting for the report for the repairs to the parking garage.
Okay.
And we had heard numbers between 5 and 20 million to repair the garage. And I haven't seen any documentation as to, I see the numbers they've plugged in for potential repairs, but I want to see in that engineer's report where they're hitting. Are they doing the very, very minimum, or are they not? So,
Seismic lighting, we'll find out what it is.
Thank you, Mr. Bosky. Mr. Starr?
Ernie, Mr. Hall, through the chair, are you still on the ACDA? Can you also ask the question and provide your sort of balanced response? The administration response would be helpful to know on their capital plan requirements. Ms. Dembowski's talking about. Can you also provide the assembly summary from your?
I'll try to find out. I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah, I'd like your opinion as well. If you could go to those committee meetings.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Starr. Mr. Flynn?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Again, for information, I did have a conversation with Mr. Halcro last week. And at that time, his intent was to seek your approval to let a contract with RIM, what's her name? Larry Cash, who's a municipal contractor, to remodel the transit center. So that may be what they're talking about.
I saw that on Facebook.
I think that's been a part of capital planning, but the engineer report that you're talking about, I know it was out there, but I don't remember ever hearing the final version on that.
Maybe you can
It's a good question.
help us or anything.
Yeah.
Well, and if I may, just 1 second, that parking, a huge liability, there was a big gulf between $5 million and $20 million. And so I think when we go into the budget, it'd be helpful for us to understand, if we're putting patch on it or if we're really fixing what needs to be.
Thank you, everyone. Mr. Trainee? Did you want to
Yeah,
respond?
no, I heard 3.5, but I never heard a final on what it was supposed to be.
Thank you, Mr. Law. Mr. Trainee?
Just saw this report you did. It was on Channel 2 News last night, and it was kind of new to see what they wanted to do over there. Should be interesting when they finally come to us and want to talk to us about it.
Thank you, Mr. Trainee. Okay, our last set of proposed amendments is the general government capital budget.
Hey, wait a minute, Patrick's got something to do with it.
Mr. Flynn, I'm sorry. I just turned the page. I
You're
don't
being
know
so
what-
quiet over there, Patrick.
Subconsciously, you
No,
know.
it's very important.
Thank you. The next amendment is an enterprise utility amendment. Mr. Flynn?
Thank you, Madam
You're
Chair.
welcome.
And I surely don't take any offense. This reflects, I had a conversation earlier in the week with the administration because I had heard reports that we were not going to backfill the port communications position when Ms. Witt left, but it didn't seem to be reflected in the budget. And so I just asked her, what are we doing here? And what I gleaned from that conversation was the intent is to sort of to share an external affairs position between ML&P and the port, and so this just reflects that change. I'm not telling them how to do it, just reflecting the cost savings associated with it.
Thank you, Mr. Flynn. Now, general government capital improvement budget. And the first one is from Chair Trainee and myself. Mr. Trainee?
It's just to change the year in which we want the bond from 2020 to 2016. We got the original money from the state to do the plans design, we're shovel ready. We just want to put this on this year's 2016 budget. Go to the voters and try and get it approved by them. This area in town needs it. I've been through there when they've got a flood, and I saw pretty good site condos with 1.5 feet of water in the garage. The water goes into the homes. And Cindy Squire's here, so if you have any questions on the need for it, talk to Cindy. She does a great job.
Mr. Starr? Thank you, Mr. Trainee.
More of your list. I looked at the 6-year fiscal plan discussion as it related to your policy, the administration's policy about retiring bonds and issuing new ones. And the trend for the last number of years has been to retire and reissue about the same balance of debt and debt service. Maybe the debt service number's not gonna stay the same because the cost of money's going up. But is it still the policy or gonna be the policy to sort of try to remain in that status quo, do you know?
I don't know. I know the mayor is considering, what will the ultimate bond level be. I think that's a discussion that he has yet to conclude.
Well, it's vital that we sort of have a direction from the administration as it relates to where you jointly work with us on projects. There may be some that we can move out or in, but the idea that we expand debt service will be a question, and I don't want to beat it up at the budget times, but 6-year fiscal plan is typically where we would see a statement of that intent, and I didn't see it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Stover. Okay, next amendment is amendment number 2, and that's Mr. Starr and Mr. Trainee. Who wants to go for it?
I'll speak to it. Again, I think the idea of that down Ship Creek development issue has got to be started somehow or another. And there's 2 issues going on here. One of them is go where the money is. There'll be $159 million in cash reserves in ML&P's cash. And Marilyn, I talk fast, but perhaps it's your duty to say, is it okay to buy land directly out of operating capital, which was how I initially packaged the amendment, was just let ML&P buy the property outright. The assessed value is going down on it, partly because of the drama that occurs in and around that corridor with the homelessness, the Beans Cafe stuff, all that. This involves Mr. Oliva and his companies. He currently leases this land to the ML&P group now and has for some time. There's a building on it. They actively incorporated in their facility, and I doubt it's going to go anywhere. I think they're going to always need that facility in some capacity or another. In my opinion, it would be a bargain to buy it now. We have the cash and the cash reserves. If it ultimately comes out like we did the parkland up in Muldoon, ML&P bought that, we reimbursed the municipality later if the needs changed. But my focus on having this conversation now is to secure leased land over $60,000 a year as lease payments coming out of ML&P's pocket. If that's just gonna go on forever, let's buy it. Secondarily is, can we be the impetus of change for that corridor and start to move municipal resources in there to solve the problem?
Ms. Johnston?
My only question to the administration, and if this goes back to the original owner, but there is contaminated soil all around there in ML&P, and I would think we need to have that question, if we can have that question answered.
Yeah, you know, I didn't put it in the ACDA budget through the chair because I had a bad experience with the ACDA's stuff in previous times in terms of due diligence and bypass the sort of normal protocols, nor did I try to burden the MOA with it, real estate services, but I would hope exactly that is done prudently. I remember buying land that ACDA sat through one of those meetings, and we bought contaminated dry cleaner land up there that cost us a bundle.
Right.
Because we just wrote a check. And so I think the MLP's got some capacity to do good land work, and I'd like them to consider it inside their budget. So who decides that, I think we do. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson. Mr. Stern, Mr. Deal.
I was just piling on there, that whole neighborhood has problems, even the hospital has, I'm sure all that property
I'm sorry to add one more thing. The second page of that is the actual budget plan as their capital is done, and it's pretty vague. So I think that the $20 million that they plan perhaps has some, it's fungible.
Thank you, Mr. Starr. We have one more amendment. Amendment number 3, Mr. Peterson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This amendment is for $5,550,000. This has been the number one priority for the Basher Community Council for as long as there's been Basher Community Council. And there's only one road that goes up to Stuckagon Heights and far north by Centennial Park. And there's a 0.4 of a mile section that is only 22 feet wide. And there are no drainage ditches on each side. And there's been several very close accidents where there's a lot of pedestrians and bicyclists and people that end up having to ride on the shoulders of the road there. And you come around this corner down the hill as you're coming down, and you turn the corner and there they are. And it's just a matter of time before someone is killed on this road. And so at some point in time, it has to be done. And so I stuck it in the bonds position.
Thank you, Mr. Peterson. Mr. Starr, Mr.
So
Flynn.
typically we see projects move up, like we're proposing moving one up from 17 to 15. In this case, it has never shown up in any capital budget plan before.
This was on the CIP list for years, and I don't know what happened to it.
I think it was on last year.
David?
So,
Yeah, through the chair, Mr. Starr, for the record, David Dunsmore, staff to Mr. Peterson. This is in the current budget, but to be funded only 50% and to be funded entirely by state grants, which do not exist yet. So this would be changing the grant, the source of one, doing 100% funding instead of only 50%, and changing the fund source to bonds instead of state funding, which is unlikely to occur.
okay, so the accuracy of the funding source page isn't quite exactly right. It's already funded. If I just heard you right, it's in the book already, just not accurately the way you guys want to do it.
Through the chair, Mr. Starr, and I apologize if there's any mistake in how the amendment was prepared. It's mine and not Mr. Peterson's.
I'll look it up.
His intent was to have it, instead of being 50% funded and funded by a state grant that does not exist, to fund it at 100% and fund it through bonds.
Well, I'll do homework as it's listed in there. I didn't look, but typically they go from design funding to project construction to whatever. So if we've already addressed it, I'll look. If you could help me with that, I'd like to know it before we debate.
Mr. Peterson, Mr. Starr. Mr. Flynn?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just, and I apologize for my ignorance. I know that, is this within ARTSA or is it in its own road surface area?
Good question.
They have the road service area.
Is it Garza?
Yeah, through the chair, Mr. Flynn, this portion of the road is in ARTSA. There are actually two road service areas farther up. There's farther up the road, but this portion is ARTSA.
Thank you, Mr. Flynn. Okay, there are no other proposed amendments, and I'm just gonna take a moment to thank all of you for your indulgence. We went a little more than a half an hour over our scheduled time, and I know everybody has plans when we have work sessions scheduled for an hour, so thanks for hanging in there. And, as we stand right now, and this is what it's gonna be, our next work session is November 20th. It's scheduled from 1 to 2, and that work session is to go over our amendments in the administration's response, but I'm gonna ask the clerk to schedule it for at least an hour and a half, maybe 2, so that everybody knows that this is what the time that we have scheduled for our work session, so you can make your plans accordingly. And with that said, meeting adjourned.